the chat box, and we'll go over answers at the end of the webinar. We'll cover as many questions as possible. We'll also make a complete list of the questions and answers available to you later in the week. Procurement procedures are among the most complicated aspects of FTA compliance. This webinar is an overview of ODOT's Office of Transit procurement procedures for subrecipients. It's not intended to be an all-encompassing instructional on procurement, but that will be offered at our Transit Academy August 2nd, coming up, August 2nd. It's going to be from 9 to 4 here at ODOT Central. If you haven't heard about that yet, you will be getting information. There's a shout out going to all the systems about that. So that's going to be an important one to go to. It's going to cover everything in much more detail than this is what we're going to do today. So first of all, we're going to cover the procurement process for purchasing goods and or services with FTA funds. We're going to go over the procurement checklist that if you haven't heard of or don't know about, you should know about or will know about at some point. So we're going to go over the items on that and the forms that go along with it, as well as the documentation needed that you need to submit to ODOT with any payment requests that you make, resources that are available to you to facilitate compliant procurements, and where to find the things that you need. That's not a universal where to find the things that you need. This is just for procurement. We're going to keep it there. So first of all, procurement policies, these are really the backbone of your entire procurement system. Procurement policies are required of all subrecipients. Anyone that receives FTA funding, anyone that receives federal funding should in fact have a procurement policy. We're currently reviewing these policies to ensure that they are compliant with FTA standards. Your agency's procurement policies should be followed except in cases where local policy may be less restrictive than FTA. In the course of reviewing some policies, I have found a couple where the small purchase level is anything under $5,000. That would be considered less restrictive. We're really concerned with how we're managing FTA funds. So you have to figure out, in the use of FTA funds within your local policy, you need to be using FTA guidelines. So 3,500 is the micro purchase level. Again, we've been reviewing policies, each transit system's policy, and noting what's missing from the policies and providing individual guidance as we go through that process. So if you haven't heard from us, you may be, if you don't hear from us, that means that your procurement policy is perfect, which I think there are very few of those because procurement is such a difficult and complicated process. Procurement policy must-haves, and these are not all of the elements that need to be in a procurement policy or should be in a procurement policy. What I'm identifying here are some of the real cornerstones of a good procurement policy, and they're also the things that tend to either be missing from policies or not fully detailed and described. A breakdown of the levels of procurement and detailed explanation of procedure for each level. That means that each of the levels, I noted the example of the 5,000. For each level of purchase and the process that goes along with that, that should be identified in your policy and explained. Written standards of conduct, code of ethics, and protest procedures. Again, these are the most likely to be missing or not fully described in a policy, and they're really key. Many times the code of conduct is included, but it says what you shouldn't do, but not what happens if you do what you shouldn't do. So both the standards of conduct and the code of ethics need to include any penalties that you as the employer associate with conduct and ethics violations. Up that little line after something in a policy that says, if you break this, the following XYZ will happen, up to and including termination or whatever that might be. But there needs to be penalties addressed in your policy. procurement policies should, again, these are the levels that we need them to outline, because FTA, we're looking really at FTA levels. So that's what we're going to look for with your procurements. Again, your local policies, I've been through, I think about 34 policies so far, and they all look very, very different. Some are called purchasing manuals, purchasing process and procedure. Most of them are called procurement policies, but it's important that they outline what you do at each step. And we'll be focusing primarily on small purchase level today, but we're going to cover the others briefly. We're focusing on small purchase because that's where we're finding most of the procurement procedures are coming into play. At the micro level, we're still concerned, we're always concerned about how FTA dollars are being used, but as we continue through to higher levels of spending, it becomes more detailed. So starting with micro purchases. So the micro purchase, this doesn't mean it's so small you need a microscope to see it. Ha ha ha, that's my big joke for the morning. Also, before anyone asks the questions, no, ODOT does not need to do a full procurement review on each pencil that you purchase or each sheet of paper, nor on every micro purchase you make. So going forward, we may have a time when we say, okay, you know, we know that you're buying staples, pencils, small purchases. Possibly we'll have you do a micro purchase for an entire, you know, office supplies. So it would be an entire category of expenses. That's something that ODOT will be working on. For now, what we have in the checklist is what we're using. So please don't send procurement documents for individual pencil purchases. That's the moral of this slide. Documentation requirements at the micro level are minimal, but they include fair and reasonable price determination, which fair and reasonable price determination is really throughout procurement. That's what we're aiming for, fair, reasonable, and open competition. Determining fair and reasonable price is the first step in making a sound purchase decision. At the micro level, it's a simple process, but it must be documented. A lot of times people will say, well, you looked it up online, or, you know, it's something that the IT department, it's a computer in the IT department, they know what a fair and reasonable price is. That's fine to me. But in the world of procurement compliance reviews, if it isn't written down, it did not happen. That needs to be documented. ODOT has a fair and reasonable price determination form that you can use for that. You can use a variation if your agency already has a form, a fair and reasonable price determination form or something that's similar. You can use that as well, as long as you use something to document that and it's in your procurement records. This is what the ODOT Fair and Reasonable Price Determination Form looks like. I'm going to, at some point during the webinar today, try to do something a little bit techy and pull up Black Cat to show you the checklist and the forms where they are. We'll see how that goes, but for right now, I just copied and pasted it into this slide so you could have a look. It's pretty simple. Here's the area that we're going to spend most of our time on today. Small purchases are between $3,500 to the simple acquisition threshold of $150,000. For this, the list starts to get longer of what you need. As the level of procurement goes up, so do the documentation requirements. Required federal clauses must be included with all POs at the small purchase level. This is different from micro. We don't need that for micro. We've developed ODOT has developed a DBE form as well that is going to help both you and ODOT in reporting the FTA reporting requirements for DBE. The DBE form is not required for micro. So if you didn't, anything that's not on the list for micro, I know sometimes people will say, well, do I need to do that for the micro purchase? No, if it wasn't on here, you don't need to do it. Unless, of course, your local procurement policy tells you you must. I'm always going to say that. Make sure you're following your local procurement policies, any state, local rules and regs. For ODOT's perspective, we're concerned with how you're spending FTA funds, so that's the focus of our, that's how we've really created the procurement process that we have in place now. Okay, this is a little bit new, the first bullet here, ODOT approval for all purchases greater than $3,500. So what this really, this is not a levels of concurrence, which at the large level you need to do. This is just calling in to check and say, hey, I have a purchase that's $4,000 or $10,000 or $15,000. Any purchase that you're going to make over $3,500, you should be calling in to your rep, letting them know that you're making the purchase, and they can help you out with any of the pieces of that. Again, if it's a more complicated purchase, your rep will be able to help you out and make sure that you walk through the steps correctly and that we're all safe and compliant in the end. Independent cost estimate, complete specifications, price quotations, cost price analysis, awarded suppliers, proposal, vendor responsibility determination, written record of procurement history, a PO with the required federal clauses, the invoice, and the DBE form will be required. Now you'll notice that cost and price analysis, that we won't actually need to do if we do a really good job here at the independent cost estimate. There's a good chance you won't need to do this because this happens when you've done your independent cost estimate, you've done a good job on it, and you've done a good job on your specifications, and then you go out for quotes, and all the quotes come back outside of that range that you determined was fair and reasonable when you did the independent cost estimate. So something is off. Then we're going to want to do a cost analysis or price analysis on that. And again, depending on if this is a $4,000, you're buying a couple of computers, something like that, it really depends on the particular purchase. For the most part, we're going to follow all of these. But again, that's why it's important that you get in touch with your rep, let them know you're making a purchase, and they can walk you through the steps. So let's go through a couple of these. Independent cost estimate, that's my favorite. ICE baby, we just call it the ICE. So this establishes the range of prices that the goods or services being acquired should fall into. This is the fair and reasonable range, what you would expect to pay given what you're purchasing. Cost estimate documentation provides the justification and supporting evidence that the price of a good or service is both fair and reasonable. This lack of an ICE is in the top 3 FTA compliance review findings consistently. It's one that is just often overlooked. And sometimes it's overlooked, sometimes it's not overlooked, but back to the example I used earlier, someone will say, well, I talked to this person, and I talked to that person, and I looked it up online, and then I called the system next door, and because they had just purchased one. The important thing here is this all needs to be written down and documented. It doesn't need to be a huge report. It doesn't need to be an essay. It's actually fairly simple, and when you get used to using an ICE, I think that from my geeky perspective, I love independent cost estimates because they help everything else. They help the rest of your procurement really run smoothly, and it's my hope that once we all get used to using these, they're going to become a tool and not an additional, documenting burden to you. Taking the time to do a thorough cost estimate in advance will save you work and hassle of having to complete cost and price analysis should your quotes and bids fall far outside the price range that you've determined to be fair and reasonable. I went over that already, but just can't say it enough. So here's again, we have an independent cost estimate form for you. I'm going to show you where you can find those in just a little bit. And I'm going to show you what it looks like now because I copied and pasted it here. So there's a form available. All of the procurement, the checklists and the forms are on Black Hat. and also available on the Office of Transit's website. You can also receive them. We can email them to you upon request. I know there may be some folks on the line today who don't have access to Black Cat. Please get in touch with someone here at ODOT and they can email you any of the documentation that you need, any of the forms that you need. Again, it's fairly simple. You just have to have this on hand. Where did you get it? What are the published prices? Where did you get the information from? Again, if this is a small $4,000, this is going to be less detailed than if you're purchasing, you know, a couple of buses or something larger. A bus barn, you're building something, you're doing construction. They're just, again, I can't cover all of that in 1 hour. But each of those things, particularly construction where you get into wages and there's a whole, you know, the Davis-Bacon Act does come into play there. There are additional things that are required. So today we're covering some of the very basics. And August 2nd and August 3rd are great days to be here in Columbus, Ohio, because we're going to be having Rich Garrity here for the entire day, both of those days. One day is going to be on procurement, a full day on it, so imagine the fun that we're going to have that day. I can't wait. And then again, the next day we're going to have, on August 3rd, we're going to have federal compliance for the whole day. So, I mean, that's 2 days. Who would want to miss that? Right? In summertime, it's going to be great. So here again, this is just the last piece of the independent cost estimate here. Again, if you need help filling these out, phone your rep, email your rep. People here can help you walk through this. It's most important that we have it done. It doesn't have to be perfect, and people are here to help you to make that the best you can. Okay, so I'm going to just go over this really quickly. Price quotations. The documentation of at least 3 quotes is required at the small purchase level. Documentation is a key word. I'm going to stress that throughout this webinar. There needs to be a piece of paper or somewhere, something that you pull up on your computer screen that shows, here is what I've done. I did it, and then I checked it off. This documentation must be included with your payment requests and documents maintained with your procurement records. There may be instances when an item is so unique or specific to one vendor, or only one vendor exists within a feasible geographic proximity, when we're going for just one. So when we don't have open competition, that's a sole source purchase. The sole source justification form is required for purchases above the micro threshold where there's only a single supplier of a good or service. Sole source justification is not required for any purchases at or below the micro level. So the sole source justification, we also have a form for that you can use to fill out. We try to avoid sole source as much as possible because compliant procurement is all about open and fair competition. There are instances, though, if you have, say, a scheduling and dispatch software that you want to add a component to, it wouldn't make sense for you to change the entire software system, your entire scheduling dispatching software. You just need to add a module. So that is one example of a sole source. We've run into that with radios when you're adding additional things to radios, and there are any number of things that come up, but we want to avoid sole source as much as possible, except in the instances that I just gave examples for where it's a must. So price and cost analysis. This is actually the slide that I'm going to go over quickly. Hopefully we're not going to be in the situation of doing many price and cost analysis because we're going to do such a good job on our independent cost estimates that we're not going to need to. So with a cost analysis, the price analysis will be the usual procedure followed in a competitive situation and in situations where items are being procured, which are sold in the commercial marketplace to the general public. A price analysis is an evaluation of the offeror's price relative to the prices being offered by other vendors and being paid by the general public for the same or similar items. So when I say the product must be a commercial product, that means one for which there's a basis of comparison in the marketplace. Price analysis would not be suitable, for example, for research and development items or for one-of-a-kind items for which there are no basis of comparison. It's not necessary that competing products be exactly identical to the product being offered, but you must be able to compare the product's capabilities and their respective price differences in light of varying capabilities. These are, again, I'm just going to interrupt myself and say, these are really for as we're getting into more technical procurements and higher end procurements that these, having to do a price analysis may come into play. By making these comparisons, you're able to make a value judgment that a particular product's performance capabilities warrant a higher or lower price than a competing product. So if you need to go outside of the range that your ICE, you've determined, you went back and looked at your ICE, that your prices fell outside of it, then you're going to do a price analysis and determine, well, here's why, this is why we're going to pay more or pay less than for this than a competing product. A cost analysis, on the other hand, is required whenever a price analysis can't be performed. A cost analysis entails the review and evaluation of separate cost elements and the proposed profit of an offeror's cost proposal. Cost analysis is very difficult, and we definitely want to avoid this to the extent possible. They're very difficult to do. Cost analysis are used when bids or proposals come in way outside the price range determined by the ICE. Cost analysis can be difficult and very expensive to conduct. Typically, people need to hire help to do this. And again, this is for very much happens for the higher end purchases that you may be making. Again, performing a thorough ICE prior to engaging in a procurement can help to avoid this. Yeah, no, not that I'm advocating for the independent cost estimate or anything. The product or service being offered is not susceptible to being evaluated against other commercially available items or similar products or services. This is also when the cost analysis is going to come into play. Examples of this might include a procurement for a consultant to come in and help you out with an ADA plan, any procurement for professional services where no competing price proposals are submitted, as in a procurement for architectural engineering services if you get into the A&E world, and where only one cost proposal is solicited from the highest ranking firm, or a sole source procurement for other types of services. Hopefully, I'm going to move along from this. Again, if people have questions, you can enter them into the chat box and we'll go over them. This is about these two, the price and cost analysis slides are probably the most technical that I'm going to get in this presentation today. Again, having to do a basics in an hour and provide you with what you need for ODOT. And the August 2nd procurement presentation here at ODOT will be very important to attend. You'll get all the bells and whistles. So, large procurements are those procurements greater than the simplified acquisition threshold of $150,000. These are competitive RFP or ITB, request for proposal or invitation to bid. Prior to engaging in a large procurement, subrecipients must contact ODOT representatives to discuss the process. When you get to this level of procurement, we're going to be really walking hand in hand with you through every step of your procurement. It requires that you receive concurrence at 3 stages. First, approval of bid and proposal package, so you complete your RFP, send that into ODOT. They're going to take a look at it. You're going to outline what you're going to do for the proposal, where you're going to advertise, for how long you're going to advertise. All those details are going to be in that bid and proposal package that you send to ODOT and ask for concurrence. ODOT then reviews what you've sent, either asks you to make tweaks or sends you back the concurrence and says, yes, this is all good, go ahead. So then you bid it out, and once you received your proposals back in and you've reviewed them and gone through whatever criteria you're using to review and base your award on, once you've done that, you'll again contact ODOT for concurrence and say we've chosen this vendor and here's what we base it on, and then you send that information. You send the entire package of information to ODOT. They will review it, make sure it all looks good, and that by choosing the vendor that you want to award to, we're not doing anything wrong, that it's all good. So you'll get a concurrence letter back from ODOT saying, yep, it looks good, go ahead. At that point, you're going to make the award, and then the last concurrence is going to happen around the contract that you have with the vendor you've chosen. At this point, once we say, okay, go ahead, you're going to work on your contract. It's important that your contract be approved by your agency's legal department or legal counsel prior to coming back to ODOT for concurrence. We're going to want your legal to have reviewed it and said, yes, this is good, it meets all of our requirements. And then it comes to ODOT, and we do the same thing here and ensure that it meets all the ODOT and FTA requirements. When it does, it's beautiful, and ODOT will send you back a concurrence, and then you can execute that contract. So there are probably going to be a number of questions around small procurement, but let's just move forward and see. The written record of procurement history. This is the documents that are needed for you to have on hand. So what we want you to do is make copies of those or scan them and send them, the documents, to ODOT, but to have the originals or the hard copies in your procurement files for however long your record retention process is, and that you have those on hand in the event of an FTA procurement review and you're chosen for that. That's a lucky day when you get chosen for that. So the items, the elements on the checklist really make up the bulk of the written record of procurement history that you need. So instead of putting a check mark in that checklist box, you may want to consider putting the date in. You can use the checklist as the backbone of your written history, very, very simply. It's critical to meeting the procurement requirements. Each element must be documented to prove that it actually happened. Somebody should be getting a nickel for every time I say that. We might be rich by the end of the webinar. Again, entering the dates on the checklist instead of just a check mark could be a really helpful tool in developing your written record. And it wouldn't require that you have to add a second or additional document. You would just use that checklist. The written record of procurement history should be kept on file for all purchases that you're requesting payment for. Where does ODOT keep the magic checklist? I mean the procurement checklist. So all the documents that we are reviewing today are available in Black Cat, and a link to the checklist has been provided in the chat box. Maybe. I can't see the chat box right now, so I'll have to take a peek at that in a second. For 5310 subrecipients, the procurement checklist and forms can easily be emailed to you upon request. We also will have those. If they're not available currently on the Office of Transit website, that's only because we've made some we're making final tweaks, but they should also be available on ODOT's website. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can always reach out to ODOT and have the forms emailed to you. Procurement documents will also be available on the website. I've said that a couple of times now. So now I'm going to try something techy. I'm going to try to actually pull up the checklist. So if you bear with me. Okay. See if I can do this. Victoria, if you're on the phone, if you can tell me if you can see this, that would be good. Anybody?
I can see it.
Yay! Awesome. Thanks. Okay, so here is here's where you're going to find these things if you're a Black Cat user. Okay, you have this little dashboard up here. You go to Resources, and then you're going to go to Global Resources, and then down here to Procurement. You're going to click this. And here are the forms that you need and the magic checklist. So I'm going to open that up, and we can just take a quick look at that. Pull that over here. Okay. This is, oops. Yikes. There we go. So here is the checklist everybody loves. It actually is. It's good. I mean, it gives you the step-by-step that you need for your procurements. We've gone over these things. I'm not going to go over them. I am going to take a minute to show you Procurement Pro toward the end of the presentation. Here's the checklist for micro purchases. Again, you'll see that's all you need. And the Davis-Bacon is something that if you're in a construction, if what you're purchasing is construction, that would be like the exception to when you would need to contact ODOT for a micro purchase. If there's construction involved and it's above $2,000, we're going to want to help you out with how to meet the Davis-Bacon Act. It's not a big deal. We just need to make sure that we have that. It's wage related, wage fairness, and we can help you out with that. It doesn't happen often, so I'm not going to go into that. But again, if you are in that situation, give ODOT a call and someone will help you out with that. Small, again, similar to the list that we went over on the slide. And again, as I mentioned, we typically are looking for people to check these off, but in over the past few months and talking about procurement a lot, and tweaking the checklist and the whole process, it was determined that why not add the date that you do something in here, your independent cost estimate. Of course, you're still going to have that document which will have a date on it, but if you just put the date that you did it here, when you completed the specifications, when you did the price quotations, this in effect will serve as like the cover of your written record of procurement. Vendor responsibility, I don't think we went into detail on that. If you're familiar with it, it's a SAMS. This is really looking for, you don't want to use a vendor that's been debarred or is not allowed to do business with the federal government or with the state government, actually. So, you know, the FTA requirement is that you have a copy of the SAM search. Some people have asked me, well, I did the SAM search, but nothing came up. So how do I document nothing? Well, I know it sounds a little silly, but you print out the paper that says no findings or no results. You do a search of the vendor, no results. That's good. That's what you want to see. So you print that out from the website that says no findings or no, didn't come up. So that means that you can use that vendor. I think that when you get up in higher numbers, you're also going to want to look and make sure that a vendor isn't debarred in Ohio as well. And I do go over that in vendor responsibility and determination. You know, we don't, on the checklist, it only says the SAM search. There's a lot more you can do with vendor responsibility. The more you spend, I think the more in detail you're going to want to look and to really look. Because, I mean, if you're doing a procurement for a third-party provider, which may be, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're going to want to ensure that vendor that you choose is not debarred, or contractor is not debarred here in Ohio as well. The one we're most concerned with that FTA is going to look at in a procurement review is the SAM. And you just click on this. And if it allows me, oops, it won't. Anyway, system for award management. It's very easy to navigate. My computer is not allowing me to do that right now, but you can see that, you know, if you use the use the forms that are provided for you. You can click on any of these links and they're going to take you. Yeah, here you go. So really the forms that are, the checklist and the forms that we've created for you are really help you step through each part of the process. So let me just, okay, I'm not ready for going to RTAP yet. Bear with me just one moment, please. Okay. So some other resources for you. In addition, this is the 4220.1F is the Bible of procurement. So of FTA procurement. It is, you know, you should read through it at least once in your lifetime just for the joy of having done so. And it just goes through each, when you get down, there are some details of procurement that the what ifs that happen along the way that you're scratching your head like, okay, well this, you know, what do I do at this point? Something out of the usual comes up. Look at 4220.1F. Or actually Google it. That's the easiest way. I'm actually not going to open that. And then the Best Practices Procurement and Lessons Learned Manual is also available. That was updated in 2016. And it's really, this is best practices, it's not requirements, but there are requirements kind of intertwined there. It will tell you best ways to meet the regulations. And it's really very, very, very helpful. And my favorite is the National RTAP website. So many of you have probably been directed to Procurement Pro. If you haven't, I'm just going to show you briefly, I think. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so National RTAP. If you don't know about National RTAP, I highly recommend that you visit the site. It's just a ton of tools and resources available to you. You do have to set up an account. So I have an account and I already logged in. And when you log in, you get all of these little things on the side, what you want to do, templates. It's a great resource. For Procurement Pro, you're going to go into Procurement Pro. Okay, they want me to log in again, so let's see if it lets me. This is actually better than the last time because the last time we did a webinar, the first one back in February, and it wouldn't allow me on. So you accept. I mean, once you're set up in here, it goes pretty quickly. So, okay, I need to do this. Thanks for your patience with this. I think it is a benefit to see when we tell you there's a resource available. I think there's a great benefit to actually seeing it. So maybe they'll let me on or not. Okay, so this is where you can go and you can enter in your procurement, and it's going to generate the things that you need to do. So although Ohio has some of its own, every state has some of its own requirements related to procurement, particularly the process of procurement. But this will get you started. You get to choose what it is you want. So if you were doing architecture, engineering, building kind of things, you maybe would choose that. Let's see what happens if you do that. So what this is doing right now is any of the FTA federal requirements related to an architectural engineering procurement are they're going to walk you through this process step by step. I cannot emphasize enough the value of Procurement Pro to anyone who making purchases with FTA dollars. It's just best. It's great. I'm gushing about Procurement Pro. can't see me, but I'm sure you can hear me. So here's this just is one step. I'm not going to fill these things in, but it walks you through them all. Let's say we had a different kind. Let's go to rolling stock because that's one you. It's not fast. It's not a fast website, or else my computer is slow, or it could be a combination. There we go. Okay, so let's see. We're going to go for rolling stock this time. Let's see. Again, anything related to a rolling stock procurement, all the FTA requirements related to that are going to be in the background being collected. So again, we're going to have a number of units. Well, maybe here we'll do something. 2. Well, let's say you're going to be 58. Yeah, it's not a 40-foot bus. Come on. So it's calculating for me. It does all that. I could have done that easily, but you know. So, you know, a lot of times you may be not be putting a cost per unit. It may be an estimated budget instead of the total cost. You may want to add additional to that. So the procurement threshold is small purchase. All right, next, what happens? Then you're going to have all of the elements for small purchase. No, so if you were going to piggyback, there's an example of that. If it's non-competitive, if this is something that's, I don't know why it would be a sole source and rolling stock, but that is there. So that will help you. Say it is. We'll pretend. What happens then? What do you need to do? It just, you can see, I'm not going to go much further with this. I want to have some time to answer some questions as well. But you can see how useful this tool is and how it can help your procurement process. Collecting a lot of documents. Thank you for your patience with this.
Sara, while that's happening, do you want to go ahead and take a question or two?
Sure.
I can read them off to you.
Okay,
so
great.
That way you can keep that window open and watch while it does its collection of documents.
Okay, great.
Let's see. Did it do what it needed to there?
Yeah, but let's go ahead and take a question.
Okay.
We can, yeah.
It was Lori Cleaver. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So as you mentioned, treating a category of spending, office supplies from Staples was the example, as its own procurement at the micro level and documenting accordingly, ICE, etc. How should categories of expenses that in aggregate exceed the micro level, vehicle maintenance parts and supplies from one vendor, be treated, and what documentation concurrence is required?
So currently, and we've had a lot of discussion about this here at ODOT, we typically only do the procurement checklist and use those things when someone has an actual identified project. It's not in the regular invoicing process. We are going to be moving to ensuring that for small purchases, a lot of folks are making purchases that fall into the small procurement level, and we're not really documenting those. So those would be treated as a small purchase. So the things that you need to do for small purchase would be required. They really are required. So in the instance of parts and you get a transmission, that's really I think that one of the things, I know that this was my case when I was a transit director. I had a shop that I used all the time, so I always used those. I didn't really stop and think. Occasionally I would go out and get someone else to do something, but I didn't really think of it in terms of that was the local garage, so that's just what I'm using. So in terms of doing like transmissions, things that are going to cost more than $3,500, it's important that we follow that small procurement checklist. I know that has not really been rolled out to subrecipients here in Ohio, that when you're doing that within the normal, your normal grant, your 5311 grant, and you're invoicing it on a monthly basis, we haven't asked you to provide that documentation. That is going to be a requirement going forward. I'm not sure when that will go into effect, but it is something we all need to be aware of and to start practicing those good procurement practices now, if you haven't already. I'm sure most of you probably are. So,
but if they have purchases from the same vendor that would add up to more than $3,500 but are just made at different times during the year.
Oh no, those are micro. Then those are, if they don't, yeah, if they're made during the year, then they're micro. We're just talking about an individual
one-time purchase over $3,500.
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Do you want to go back to?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. Okay, so this is what comes up when we click the sole source or non-competitive, and I'm just going to show you a few of these boxes. Looks like this. You enter the information. I know it might look like a lot, but once you do it and then you click next, it compiles this for you. And so at the end of it, you have all of the documentation. If I haven't gone through an entire procurement process, like an example scenario using Procurement Pro, but at the end, what I've seen come out of this is many of the things that we have in our checklist are going to be already pre-populated for you. If it's pre-populated and it's a RTAP document, it can be used in place of the independent cost estimate form. Actually, I take that back. The independent cost estimate form still needs to be done because you do that prior to even engaging at this level in a procurement. But at the end, you're going to have all of the policies and all of the federal clauses for your particular procurement. So it makes it very easy. Okay, I'm going to go back for a moment to the procurement checklist. And then here. So we've provided a number, ODOT has provided a number of forms for you. A quote sheet you can use. You don't have to use this quote sheet. Where is it? Maybe it's in here. And all of the things that you see here, this is in black cap, but these forms will all be available on the Office of Transit website. The fair and reasonable price form right here. Just fill it in. Trying to make it as easy as possible. It's procurement, so it can't be totally painless, but really trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. Let's see, what else we're going to look at. Yeah, your independent cost estimate form, we saw that already. The vendor responsibility determination, the DBE form. I know people have had some issues with that. It's really important that we capture the information when we're making the purchases. It's going to ease the process of DBE reporting, hopefully. The semi-annual reports that the DOT is required to send to the FTA can become quite burdensome. And I'm not just for the subrecipients, but also for DOTs. So many states have worked around different ways to make this easier. I don't think there's a way to make it completely easy, but to have forms that we use as we go so that we have it at the time of purchase and don't have to go back 5 months in our records to try and find out what we purchased and what was a DBE or not a DBE. Hopefully everyone or a number of folks that are on the line went through the DBE reporting process this last time. We're hoping to use something similar to that going forward as well to make that a little bit easier for everyone. Okay, I'm pulling up the DBE form now.
Sarah, I just wanted to let you know that we have 10 minutes left on the webinar, and we do have a few questions in the chat pod.
Okay, great. So, so now that I've shown you where the things are and shown you a little bit about what Procurement Pro does, I'm going to come back here. And ta-da, questions. Okay, now, Victoria, I may need your help with finding the chat box. I don't seem to
I'll
have
just read these off for you.
Oh, that would be perfect.
And when I'm done reading them off, then we'll also open up the phone line for questions. We have a question from Stacy. Are the procurement requirements that need ODOT approval ones that are funded through ODOT funds or for all federal procurements over $3,500?
Well, what we're concentrating on right now are FTA dollars. Any FTA dollars that are involved in a purchase, you need to use the procurement, you need to follow the procurement guidelines. I hope that answers the question. Again, your local policy may be a little bit different. If you're using federal funds, the super circular is going to override everything, and so many of the requirements are basic procurement requirements for all federal dollars. I'm not telling you to use the FTA procurement requirements for procurement using a different pot of federal funds, but some of them are pretty basic to the overall process, but they can't be, you can't use one in place of the other. So we're just concerned with FTA dollars here.
Okay. And
FTA requirements.
I've had a couple of questions about the slides. We'll make those available to everyone after the webinar is complete. Now, the next question for you, Sarah, is from Chris, and it says, if the transit agency wanted to add vehicle warranties as part of the procurement process, how would an agency include that as part of the procurement process? So they wanted to add a vehicle warranty.
They want to purchase a vehicle warranty separately than from a vehicle? That's unusual. So they would have to do the same thing. They would have to look out and see who's offering. It depends on the level too. So again, if it's something that costs less than $3,500 a year, that's not going to, it's going to be a micro. You still need to determine that it's a fair and reasonable price. If it's over that, you need to follow the small procurement checklist step by step, just as you would for any other purchase. It would be treated the same as for any other purchase to the extent that there's use of FTA funds involved.
Okay. Another question is, how do you become a Black Cat user?
That's a great question. So currently 5311 subrecipients and I believe 5307 subrecipients have access to Black Cat. I'm not sure to what extent 5310 subrecipients are able to get into Black Cat. But again, what I showed you in Black Cat, all of those forms and the checklist are available on the Office of Transit website as well. I believe there's even, we decided to make a procurement folder or a procurement label, so rather than having to go through all the forms, the whole list of forms and templates, you'll be able to click easily on the procurement link or folder, and all of the documents will be in that folder.
Okay, next question. How does resurfacing a parking lot fall under Davis-Bacon?
How does resurfacing a parking lot fall under Davis-Bacon? You need to meet the wage requirements of Davis-Bacon, fair wage requirements of Davis-Bacon. So the labor protections, labor warranties need to be met whenever you're doing construction-related procurements. So that's how, if it's again over $2,000 and there's construction involved, then we will walk you through the Davis-Bacon process, and it's just additional clauses that you need, the Davis-Bacon clauses that you would need to add to that procurement to ensure that you've done fair hiring and are paying fair wages to the people you're employing to do that work.
Now, there's a second part to that question. They said as it's maintenance or a new roof or new windows.
As maintenance?
Yeah. Does it make a difference that they've made the distinction of it being maintenance or, a new roof?
No,
or
if someone's changing a window out, it's, you're going to be, we're talking about, unless it's a major overhaul, again, and over $2,000, it's not a concern. I'm not sure what the person is getting with the question. If it's maintenance related and it's something that someone at you're already employing someone to do, one of your regular employees does that maintenance, then it wouldn't fall under this. If you're purchasing something to make those fixes or to maintain it and they're above $3,500, you need to follow the small procurement procedures.
Okay.
But unless when you're Davis-Bacon is really when someone's being hired to do labor.
We have the person's name is Pamela Garland from Greenville, so we can follow up with her directly. There's also another question from Pamela, which was next on the list. If you have certain equipment, for example, alarm system, heating, air system, and always use the company who installed, how do you document this? Is this sole source? And I would take it that they're using the company who installed it to do follow-up, either repairs or maintenance to the systems.
Right. Pam, exactly. That is sole source. I think we had that situation. Actually, you're one of the examples. With the dispatching and scheduling software, at one point, I think last year, you wanted to add a module to that, a prepay module to that. So we needed to do a sole source justification because you had a software package that you were using. It would be very silly to change your entire software just to get a prepayment module. And so there's a justification for using just that one provider. Same with your HVAC system. You're not going to change out your entire HVAC system. That would make no sense whatsoever. So we're going to document, we're going to just justify why you're procuring only with that specific vendor.
Okay. Now we have another question, and if we do run out of time on these questions, we'll put together, as Sara had mentioned, a document with the responses and make sure that everyone receives it after this webinar. Question here from Chris says, we are in Northeast Ohio, so our third-party administrator for our 5310 funds is NOACA. Who would be the one being reviewed by the FTA? However, outside of the 5310 items under state contracts, such as vehicles, we would be responsible at the recipient site level for the procurement process for ancillary items that are not on state contract, such as mobile radios or cameras, correct? Question mark.
The person that the funds are flowing to is responsible. The subrecipient is responsible. Does that answer the question?
I hope so.
So the 5310, because the funds go to the, is it NOACA? I'm sorry, I can't.
It's Chris, and he's a third-party administrator. The funds are coming through NOACA.
NOACA is responsible. Okay. And responsibility, that's a good point. I'm glad we got that question. So responsibility for these items, we haven't gone over that today, but it flows down. Okay, so if you're the subrecipient and you're contracting to someone who's also going to contract out, so you have a third tier contracting, you still have to have oversight of that and ensure that the person that you're contracting with is following the procurement for their contracts as well. I know we're just about out of time here. I really want to thank everyone for participating today. Again, I highly recommend you attending the day-long procurement training. That's on August 2nd. Also going to have a full day of federal compliance, not to be missed, on August 3rd. So you can come spend the night in Columbus and get 2 days of very intensive training on this. But in the meantime, anytime when in doubt, I would say when in doubt, shout out. Just contact someone here at ODOT and we can help you through it. And we'll take a look at the rest of the questions and get answers to those and send them out to you. I'm available also.
Yeah, we'll definitely send all that out along with Sara's contact information, and we'll make sure that you get the information on how to register for that upcoming training. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. It's 11 o'clock. We want to be respectful of this just being an hour. So have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.